Hey folks, Mark here. Today I wanted to go over telescope setup, initial scope setup for those of you who haven't bought one yet or are interested in trying it but don't quite have the funds or the energy or the curiosity level to go through with it. Today I'm going to level the scope tripod, put the mount on it, put the telescope on the mount, and then show you a little bit about alignment and some of the controls that you have with the telescope. Obviously, since it's daytime, we can't quite get out there and do some night shots, but at least you'll get to see how it's set up and what the steps are involved in it and about how long it takes. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than others, depending on what the weather's like, etc. But overall, I think it takes about 30 to 45 minutes to do a really excellent alignment. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. The tripod, as you can tell, is set up here, and most tripods have a little marker on the front here, and you generally point them in the direction of north as well as you can. There are plenty of apps on the phone or other things, or you could literally put a compass on top here and set it up so that it points to the north. Once you get it pointed to the north, you have adjustments on the legs where you can level the head back and forth so that it is level. One of the tools that I use for leveling is a balance or a bubble balance. Stand by real quick. Let me get that and I'll show it to you. This is a simple round bubble balance, and it has a little air bubble in it, and it's filled with liquid. And what happens is, as you level out the unit, the bubble itself will travel to the center of the balance itself. And there are little graduation marks on it to show you where essentially your bubble is. For this particular tripod, I just take the center stand and I drop it in there just like a puck, and it drops evenly in there. I look at the balance, I take a look at it, see where the bubble is at, and I adjust the legs accordingly. For this particular setup today, I've got it pretty well balanced. The bubble's just in the middle of the unit. Once you've got it balanced, you're essentially ready to set it up with the mount itself. Let me go over here. I'll grab the mount and we'll go ahead and stick it on here. The mount will always face towards the north initially, because that's what we're going to align it to. We're going to align it to the North Pole, which is a star up in the sky about 5 star lengths away from the Big Dipper. If you're not familiar with how to measure where the North Pole is, or the celestial North Pole, you can find that easily online. Let me go grab the mount. So here we have the mount. This is a Celestron Advanced VX mount. And as you can see, it fits pretty well into the tripod. It's made for this tripod, and I'm holding it down here now, and then I'm going to insert the shaft rod into it. I'm going to screw it in, get the mount nice and tight on the tripod so it's steady, and then I'm going to set it up for the legs. There's a small piece here. We're going to set it up under the legs to spread the legs out, and then we're going to tighten it up too. Now that that's set up, we're essentially ready to begin the rest of the process. But before we do that, let me tell you a few things here. This mount, to align it, you're going to take and look through the scope itself to the North Celestial Star, Polaris, and you're going to align the scope to Polaris initially. And you'll do that by way of a polar scope that's inside this particular mount, or you can attach an external polar scope. One which I use is a tiny little camera which you hook to the computer, and then from there you'll do computer adjustments to align it to the stars. To align the mount, you have a rear adjustment, a front adjustment, and 2 side adjustments. And what they're doing is they're moving the scope mount up and down and side to side, depending on what needs to be done. So with that said, we'll go ahead and we'll install our scope, because we never want to balance the mount and set it up without having the actual scope on it, because once you put the weight of the scope on it, you can offset the adjustment and your alignment to the North Star could be off. And then what happens is when you take pictures of the stars, you're elongated or you've got some shake or wobble in them. So let's go ahead and we'll put the scope on here and get that going. So the scope has a mounting bracket on it, and the mounting bracket fits into the slider here, and we use the set screws on the mount itself to adjust the scope to the mount. This scope is a rather large one. It's got a full set on it, and at the end, of course, I've got my camera, and with the camera I've got a tiny remote. This device here is an auxiliary camera. It's got a camera up in the back here. It's got a small telescope in the front, and I'm going to use this particular piece to do what they call auto guiding. Auto guiding is another process to assist this mount in staying very stable. This will plug into the mount right here, and we'll use that along with the computer to make sure that we're tracking the target that we want to photograph well. So initially, when you set up your scope, you've got it set. You want to disengage your mount to make sure that the weight on the top of the mount and the weight on the bottom of the mount are even. You do that so that when it begins tracking, it's not heavy one way or the other, which makes the motor work harder or makes it difficult for it to track properly. So what we do here is we've got a disengage lever here, and we take it and we turn the scope and we let the weight go down. And as you can see here, it's dropping down, which means that the counterweight, or the weight on the other side, is not quite positioned properly. Since the scope is heavier than the weight, that means we have to bring the weight down further to offset the weight of the scope. We'll try it again. We let go. It's nice and even. It doesn't drop down. That means that we've set the counterweight to balance out the scope, and now the scope will track evenly without too much work. On this mount itself, both here and here, we have what they call alignment marks, and we're going to reset this so that it matches up on the alignment mark, and then we're going to engage the gear lock again. At this point, we're ready to do an alignment of the mount with the scope on it. So later on tonight, when the stars come out, we're pointed to the north, and we know we're pointed to the north because we took our compass and we put the compass on the mount and we pointed it to the north. We'll hook up our polar scope, and let me show you that in a minute. We'll adjust our knobs back and forth to point it to the North Star, and then we'll perform the alignment. Right now, what I want to show you is the other parts of this setup. There's a hand controller, which allows you to move the scope back and forth, and another item I use, which is the built-in GPS. Let me get those two items and I'll set those up.